I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the scratched wooden surface beneath my hands. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows through the window. The house was silent, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator, the warmth of the room, the familiar clutter, the half-empty coffee cup by my elbow. All of it felt distant, as if I were sitting in someone else's home. I couldn't shake the heaviness that settled in my chest. It felt like a weight that had grown over time, unnoticed at first, but now suffocating. When did things between Emma and me start to change? I couldn't say for sure. Was it gradual, slipping past us like sand through an hourglass? Or had it been there all along, hiding, in plain sight? I used to be able to pinpoint the exact moments when she pulled away. A distracted kiss on the cheek before work. The way she'd sit on the other side of the couch when we watched TV. The increasing number of late nights when she claimed she had to work. But lately, those instances had multiplied, forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. And now, I had to face the truth. There was someone else. I had seen the signs. The unfamiliar cologne on her clothes, the cryptic text messages she dismissed with a quick swipe of her phone, the smile she wore when she thought I wasn't looking. But I pushed it all down, telling myself I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. Emma would never do that. We were solid. We were supposed to be solid. But yesterday, I saw the text message I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just any message. It was a declaration, an intimate thread between her and someone else, and it shattered everything. I didn't confront her immediately. I spent the night replaying every conversation, every moment that felt wrong, trying to figure out where we had gone off course. By the time she came home, I was already exhausted, emotionally, mentally. But she looked at me, and for the first time, I could see the distance in her eyes, a barrier that had been growing between us for months, maybe even years. Now, as I sat in the silence of our kitchen, waiting for her to come home, my heart pounded in my chest. Tonight, I couldn't avoid it. Tonight, I would ask her. The front door opened, and I heard her footsteps, light and unhurried, as if everything were perfectly normal. She walked into the kitchen, tossing her bag onto the counter with a casual ease that felt like a slap in the face. How could she act so unaffected when my world was crumbling? "Hey," she said, glancing at me before moving toward the fridge. I stayed silent for a moment, my throat tight. I could barely speak around the knot of emotion lodged there. "Emma," I finally managed, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "We need to talk." She paused, her hand stilling on the fridge door. Slowly, she turned to face me. Her eyes flickered with something. Apprehension, maybe? Or was it guilt? I couldn't tell. "About what?" she asked, though her tone wasn't completely innocent. She knew. She had to know. I swallowed, gathering every ounce of strength I had left. "About us?" There was a beat of silence, the tension thick enough to choke on. Her expression changed, her defenses rising, the familiar walls she put up when she didn't want to talk about something. "What do you mean by us?" she asked, her voice carefully measured. She was already preparing for the argument, as if she'd been anticipating this moment. "I saw the text," I said, my words blunt, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Her eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed, hardening. "What text?" "The one from him." I couldn't even bring myself to say his name. I didn't know who he was, but I hated him. Hated the way he had crept into my life and torn it apart, bit by bit. Emma sighed, a long, slow exhale, as if she had been holding her breath for too long. "I didn't want it to come out like this," she said, finally meeting my gaze. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been holding on to a sliver of hope that she would deny it, that maybe I had misunderstood. But there was no denying it now. "So, it's true," I said, my voice hollow. She didn't respond at first, just leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms over her chest. "Yes, it's true." I felt the ground shift beneath me, like the solid foundation of our marriage had crumbled, leaving me standing on nothing but air. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain calm. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "His name is Alex." Alex. I rolled the name around in my head, trying to match it to a face, but it didn't matter. He wasn't some faceless figure anymore. He had a name, and he had my wife. "How long?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Emma looked away, and I saw her jaw tighten. "A few months," she admitted. "A few months." While I had been sitting here, trying to hold us together, she had been with him. The betrayal was like a dagger in my chest, twisting deeper with every word she said. "Why, Emma?" My voice cracked, the raw emotion spilling out despite my efforts to contain it. "Why him? Why now?" She met my gaze then, and there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Something cold, almost detached. "Because he makes me feel alive," she said, her voice steady, almost casual, as if she were talking about a new hobby rather than an affair that had torn our life apart. I felt like I had been slapped. "Alive?" I echoed, disbelief seeping into my tone. "And what am I? Dead weight?" Her eyes flashed with something. Anger, maybe? Or was it frustration? "That's not what I mean, Ethan. I haven't felt like myself in a long time. And with him, it's different. He listens. He makes me feel wanted." I could barely process her words. All I could hear was her saying that someone else made her feel wanted, like I hadn't been enough. "And what about me, Emma?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "I've been here, trying to keep us together, and you're out there with someone else, feeling alive." She crossed her arms tighter, a defensive posture. "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" I asked, standing up from the table. "You had a choice. You chose him." She didn't back down. "I didn't choose him over you. I chose him because I needed something you weren't giving me." Her words stung more than I expected. I had always known things weren't perfect between us, but I had been trying, and now it felt like none of it had mattered. "You could have talked to me," I said, my voice quieter now, filled with exhaustion. "You didn't have to do this." Emma shook her head, her expression unreadable. "Maybe I should have, but I didn't. And now, here we are." I stood there, staring at her, the woman I had married, the woman I had shared my life with, and I realized in that moment that I didn't recognize her anymore. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. There were no more words to be said, at least not tonight. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The silence between us stretched on, unbearable and suffocating. I stood there, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, trying to find something, anything, that would make sense of this moment. My mind raced, desperately grasping for a way to understand how everything had fallen apart. Emma, my wife of 7 years, had just admitted to an affair. A few months, she'd said, as if the length of it made it any easier to stomach. Alex. The name buzzed around in my head like a hornet, stinging every time I thought about it. This man, this stranger, had somehow inserted himself into our lives without my knowing, and now he was all I could think about. But more than the betrayal itself, it was the way she had said it, the cold detachment, the matter-of-factness of it all. that left me hollow. She hadn't broken down in guilt or shame. She hadn't begged for forgiveness or even tried to explain in a way that made sense. Instead, she had stood there, arms crossed, her face tight with something I couldn't fully understand. Anger? Resentment? I wasn't sure, but it certainly wasn't regret. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice again. Emma, do you even care about what this is doing to me? To us? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pressed her lips together and looked at me with an expression that wasn't entirely cold, but wasn't soft either. Of course I care, Ethan. But what do you want me to say? You're acting like this is all black and white. But it's not. This didn't just happen out of nowhere. Then explain it to me, I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Explain why you felt the need to throw away everything we've built together for him. Emma let out a sigh, running a hand through her hair, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in her calm facade. Her eyes flickered with frustration. I didn't throw anything away. I wasn't trying to destroy us, Ethan. I needed something. Something I couldn't get here. The sting of her words cut deep. My stomach twisted as I realized what she was really saying, that whatever I had given her, it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. I had always prided myself on being the steady one, the reliable husband, the one who made sure our life ran smoothly. I worked hard to provide for us, to be the man she could lean on, the one she could count on no matter what. But somehow, that wasn't what she wanted. What is it that I didn't give you, Emma? I asked, my voice quieter now, almost pleading. What did he give you that I couldn't? Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw something soften in her expression, but it disappeared just as quickly. It's not about him being better than you. It's not even about you not giving me enough. It's different. Different how? She hesitated, chewing on her bottom lip, like she was debating whether to say it. And then, with a deep breath, she let the words spill out. With him, it feels exciting. I feel like I can be someone else, like I can break out of the routine. I feel free. Free. The word echoed in my head, making me feel like I'd been punched in the gut. How had our marriage become something that trapped her? I thought we were building a life together, something strong, something stable. But in her eyes, that stability had become a cage. So what? I said, bitterness creeping into my voice. I'm the boring husband. Who's too predictable for you? She shook her head, her expression tightening again. That's not what I said, Ethan. Don't twist my words. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. I don't need to twist your words. You just told me you're with him because you feel free when you're around him. How am I supposed to take that? Emma's gaze flicked away from mine, and I could see her frustration building. You know what, Ethan? It's not like everything was perfect between us either. Don't act like this came out of nowhere. You've been distant for months. You're always at work, always distracted. Half the time I feel like I'm invisible to you. And when I try to talk to you about it, you brush me off like I'm being dramatic. I blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but part of me knew she wasn't. I had been distant lately, caught up in the stress of work and the pressure of providing for us. I had taken for granted that she would always be there, that our marriage would somehow take care of itself. I was trying to keep things together, Emma, I said, my voice low. I thought I was doing what I needed to do for us, for our future. She exhaled sharply, her eyes flashing with anger now. And in the process, you forgot about the present. You forgot about us, Ethan. You think all I care about is the future? I wanted you. I wanted us, the way we used to be. The room felt small, suffocating. Her words stung because they were true in a way I hadn't been willing to admit. We had drifted, and maybe I had been too wrapped up in my own worries to see it. But it didn't change the fact that she had made a choice, a devastating one. So this is my fault? I asked, incredulity coloring my tone. You're saying you had an affair because I was working too much? Emma looked at me, her jaw tight, her eyes filled with frustration. I'm saying that it wasn't just about him. It was about what was missing between us. And maybe if you'd paid more attention. Stop, I interrupted, holding up a hand. I couldn't listen to her trying to justify it anymore. My heart was already raw, and every word felt like another cut. Just stop. The silence fell between us again, heavy and tense. I could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on me, but I didn't have the strength to keep arguing. What was the point? She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. Finally, I spoke again, my voice quieter now, almost resigned. Where does this leave us, Emma? She hesitated, and I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. For the first time since this conversation began, she looked vulnerable. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The admission hit me hard. After everything, she didn't even know what she wanted. Part of me had expected her to fight for us, to beg for forgiveness, to tell me she made a mistake. But now, I wasn't sure she even wanted to save our marriage. Maybe she had already made up her mind. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the exhaustion settling deep in my bones. Do you even want to try and fix this? I asked, needing to hear her say it, one way or another. Emma looked away, her gaze drifting to the floor. I don't know, she said again, softer this time. And there it was, the truth I had been dreading. She didn't know if she wanted to save what we had. Maybe in some part of her heart, she had already walked away. I stood there, staring at her, trying to understand how we had gotten here. The woman I had built a life with, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to stop it. I need some time, she said after a long pause, her voice wavering slightly. I need to figure out what I want. The weight of those words pressed down on me, heavy and unbearable. Time, space. She needed distance to figure out if she still wanted me, if she still wanted us, and I had no choice but to give it to her. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. Take all the time you need. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there. I didn't know where we were headed, or if we even had a future together. All I knew was that everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. I closed the bedroom door behind me, but it didn't muffle the suffocating silence that filled the house. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat heavy with the weight of what had just unfolded downstairs. I leaned against the door, my hand gripping the knob, trying to process everything she'd said, but it felt impossible, like trying to hold on to sand as it slipped through my fingers. I had given her space. I had let her go upstairs, hoping that some distance would allow me to think clearly, but there was no clarity, only pain, only betrayal. I don't know if I want to fix this. Those words played on a loop in my head, cutting deeper each time. It felt like a final blow, the confirmation that no matter how much I wanted to save us, she might not, and it left me feeling utterly powerless. But it wasn't just that. It was the way she had said it, the cold detachment, the way she'd spoken about him, as though she was talking about something she cherished, something she felt I couldn't give her. I wanted to scream, to shout, to ask her how she could throw away everything we had. But I was too drained, too emotionally battered to say anything more. I need time. The phrase that she had repeated so many times, and I had agreed, thinking maybe it was the only thing left to do. But that didn't change the knot of anger coiled tight in my gut. Anger that she had walked away from what we had and found someone else. Someone who, according to her, made her feel things I couldn't. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that deep down, I knew something in me had faltered. Maybe I had gotten complacent. Maybe I had put work and the stress of life ahead of us. Maybe I hadn't seen the signs. But whatever the reasons, they felt like excuses now. They didn't make the pain go away. They didn't make her affair with him any easier to understand. I paced the room, trying to calm the storm inside me. The memory of her words, the indifference in her voice, made my blood boil. I wasn't perfect, but I hadn't deserved this. I had never deserved this. After what felt like an eternity, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know more. I needed answers, even if they ripped me apart. I went back downstairs, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. Emma was still sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, staring blankly at the wall. She didn't look up as I approached, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew what was coming. She knew I couldn't let it rest. I stood at the edge of the table, staring at her for a long moment before I spoke. Why him, Emma? My voice was tight with restrained anger. Why did you choose him over me? Her head slowly lifted, and for a moment, I thought she might show some sign of regret, but instead she let out a long, tired sigh. I didn't choose him over you, Ethan. I already told you. It wasn't that simple. Stop saying that, I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. It's not just about how simple or complicated it was. You slept with another man. You had an affair, and you're sitting here acting like it was just something that happened. You made a choice, Emma. She met my gaze then, her eyes hardening, and I could feel her defenses rising again. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. You want to know why him? You want to know what it was about him? I braced myself, not knowing what was about to come, but fearing the worst. He made me feel good about myself, she said, her voice sharp and clear. He made me feel wanted in a way you haven't in a long time. And yeah, maybe I did choose him in that moment, because for once, I wasn't just your wife, or the woman who had to keep everything in line while you were too busy with work. With him, I was Emma. I felt free. I swallowed the anger building in my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. And what does that mean? You're saying I don't make you feel wanted? She looked at me, exasperation clear in her expression. Ethan, it's not about you not wanting me. It's about how you've made me feel invisible for the past year. You come home from work, you barely talk to me, and when we do talk, it's about bills or things we need to do around the house. When's the last time you asked how I was? Really asked? The weight of her words hit me, and I felt a flash of guilt. I couldn't deny that things had gotten routine between us, but that didn't justify what she had done. So what? I said, the bitterness creeping into my voice again. You turned to him because I didn't ask you enough questions. She rolled her eyes, her frustration growing. No, Ethan. I turned to him because he made me feel alive. Because when I was with him, I wasn't thinking about all the things that were falling apart in our marriage. I wasn't thinking about how we barely touch each other anymore. How you don't look at me the way you used to. Her words felt like a slap, each one landing harder than the last. And what about now? I asked. my voice quiet, but filled with pain. Do you still feel that way? Emma hesitated, biting her lip, and I could see her struggling to find the right words. It's different now, she said softly, but at the time it was what I needed. My heart sank. She wasn't even denying it. She wasn't apologizing. She was just explaining it as if it were a choice she had made to survive, and that realization cut deeper than I thought it would. So what exactly did he give you that I didn't? I asked, the words coming out before I could stop myself. What was so special about him? Emma's face tightened, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she didn't want to say it. But then, with a harsh laugh, she leaned back in her chair, almost defiant. You want the truth, Ethan? He made me feel desired, like I was the center of his world when we were together. Her words hung in the air between us, and my stomach churned. I couldn't stop myself from pressing further, even though I knew I was walking into dangerous territory. What does that mean, Emma? Are you saying I didn't make you feel that way? Or are you saying it was just better with him? She stared at me, her eyes glinting with a strange mix of anger and sadness. And then she said something I would never forget. Yes, Ethan, she said, her voice sharp. It was better with him. He made me feel things I hadn't felt in a long time. I staggered back a step, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Better, I repeated, barely able to believe what I was hearing. Emma stood up, pushing her chair back with a screech. You want to know everything, don't you? She spat, her frustration boiling over. Fine. You want me to compare? He was different from you in every way. He was confident. He wasn't weighed down by life and responsibilities. When I was with him, I didn't feel like we were just existing. I felt alive. I could feel the blood draining from my face. And what else? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. What else was better? She paused, her expression softening for a brief moment, as if she realized she had crossed a line. But then, just as quickly, she squared her shoulders and met my gaze with cold determination. He knew how to make me feel wanted, Ethan. He wasn't afraid to touch me, to look at me like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. The air between us crackled with tension, and I felt my chest tighten. Is that all he was to you? Just some fantasy? Something to fill the void? Maybe, she admitted, but it was something I needed. Needed? I asked, incredulous. You needed someone else to make you feel alive, to make you feel wanted. What about me, Emma? Did you ever think that maybe I needed you too? That I was struggling just as much? Her face softened, but only slightly. You didn't show it, Ethan. You shut me out. You acted like everything was fine, like you could handle it all on your own, and I got tired of waiting for you to let me in. So instead of talking to me, you found someone else, I said bitterly. She shook her head. I didn't plan for it to happen, Ethan. It wasn't like I was looking for someone else. It just happened. I can't believe you, I said, the anger bubbling back to the surface. You're standing here telling me that some guy who made you feel alive was worth destroying everything we had. Maybe I am, she shot back. Maybe I needed something more than what we had become. I didn't want to feel invisible anymore. I wanted to feel desired, and with him, I did. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't the woman I had built my life with. She was someone else, someone who had found fulfillment in another man's arms and now stood before me unapologetic. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I didn't know what to say anymore. The anger and the pain swirled inside me, threatening to consume everything. "So, what now?" I asked finally, my voice hollow. Emma didn't respond right away. She looked down at the floor, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost defeated. "I don't know, Ethan. I don't know where we go from here." I stared at her, feeling a strange mix of anger, heartbreak, and resignation. The woman I had loved, the woman I had promised my life to, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now she was standing here, telling me that maybe it had been worth it. "I don't know either," I said, my voice low. "But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything will be okay." She didn't respond. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me with those same distant eyes that had once been so full of warmth. I felt like a stranger, in my own home, standing across from someone I barely recognized. And in that moment, I knew that something had broken between us, something that couldn't be easily repaired. I couldn't stand still any longer. The weight of everything she had said pressed down on me, suffocating, until my frustration boiled over. My legs moved on their own, pacing back and forth across the floor. The room felt too small, too claustrophobic, and the realization hit me that there was only one thing left to do. I couldn't let this end here. Not like this, with half-truths and unanswered questions hanging in the air. I had to confront him, the man who had taken everything from me, the man who had stepped into my life and into my marriage as if he belonged there. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys off the counter, the metal clinking loudly in the silence. Emma's eyes flicked up to me, but I didn't stop to look at her. I headed straight for the front door, yanking it open with more force than necessary, and as it slammed shut behind me, the sound echoed in the stillness of the evening. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning in my chest.